Hey everyone, welcome to Connecting the Dots. This is your weekly podcast and I'm your host, Mike Cameron, where we're going to talk about bringing it all together. We're going to discuss concepts related to life, leadership, and sales. I believe that success comes when you stop trying to prove to the world how good you are and start trying to prove to yourself how much better you can be. My hope is that we can grow and get better together. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome to episode 22 of Connecting the Dots. I'm Mike Cameron and I will be your host today. I am very excited to bring you our guest today. Our guest is a fellow by the name of Warren McDonald. And Warren is a motivational speaker, author, and coach. I had the pleasure of meeting Warren at the Alberta Mortgage Brokers Association conference a number of years ago. And Warren has had the opportunity to tell his story with the likes of Oprah Winfrey, Larry King Live, and a number of other different venues. And once you hear it, you will understand how extraordinary this is. He wrote a book called A Test of Will, One Man's Extraordinary Story of Survival. In 1997, Warren lost both his legs to a climbing accident, and something that would typically slow a lot of people down only seemed to fire Warren up, and he went on to become the first double amputee above the knees to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and he still goes strong out on the speaking circuit, inspiring others to do some extraordinary things. Warren talks a lot about resilience and the fact that resilience isn't learned, it's practiced. He talks a lot about the power of perception, and when you change the way you see the world, you change the world. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Warren McDonald. Warren McDonald, thank you very much for joining me on Connecting the Dots. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. You and I met, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago now?
Yeah, I was thinking that just prior to the call. It was a few years ago, yeah.
It was a while. So, yeah, you spoke at the Alberta Mortgage Brokers Association conference, and as luck would have it, I think I was emceeing and made a bit of a joke about Judas Priest, and
that's right.
And then we ended up going to the concert together.
We got to go and do the gig. That was good.
That was a lot of fun. So I don't know if we'll have people tuning out now that we've talked about Judas Priest, but
they'll get over it.
Yeah, get over it. Give us some credit. So tell us a little bit about you.
A little bit about me. So that's a good question.
I'll do a bit of an intro before this. So I'll give some of your stats and facts and figures.
Yeah.
But maybe just tell us a little bit about you and what makes you tick.
Yeah. So I suppose I've kind of been on this interesting journey for a few years now, 16, 17 years. I kind of lose count. Where I found myself in a position where, kind of dealing with massive change and adjustment and all the rest of it, and which I'll kind of circle back to, but so kind of through that, I've found myself sharing my story with a lot of different people, which is how I ended up at the Alberta Mortgage Brokers conference. So just really trying to get people to think about how they see life, how they see their challenges, how we adapt, what shuts us down, what doesn't. So that's kind of been my thing for a little while now, is really trying to get people to look at how they see the world and how that shapes how things pan out.
Yeah. So you had an incident happen back in 1997, was it?
97, yeah.
It sort of forced you to change the way you look at the world.
Yeah, it did. It almost forced me out of the world. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, so to speak. I was climbing a peak back in Australia, and just not so much a technical climb, more of a scramble, really. I'd gone to an island called Hinchinbrook Island, just really to chill out and kind of get regrounded. And life was kind of getting pretty crazy, and whenever I found myself in that position where I just needed to slow things down, I'd grab a backpack and head out. And so, I was on an island just to do a hike of 5 or 6 days, met a guy on the beach, a Dutch guy, who suggested that we climb the island's tallest peak, and really that's kind of what we set out to do. And then 3/4 of the way up, we'd set up camp for the night, and all I really was trying to do was to do the right thing. I needed to take a leak, and I didn't want to take a leak straight into the creek, into our water supply. So I just kind of scouted around and saw a rock wall on the other side, and figured, hey, if I climb up over that, that'll get me far enough away. And it was while I had basically just kind of left the ground, started to move up this rock wall, and a huge piece of it broke loose. And next thing you know, I got a refrigerator-sized piece of rock sitting in my lap, which, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've seen the video. So when you say a large size piece of rock, maybe expand on that. I mean,
yeah, here's the thing. They told afterwards that it weighed 1 ton, or what is that, 2,200 pounds. The thing is, a ton of rock actually doesn't look that big. I mean, it kind of is. When I say refrigerator size, that's not entirely true. I think a refrigerator size rock, it'd probably be a couple tons, but it didn't really look that big. And although it became obvious fairly quickly that we couldn't move it. This thing, it all happened so quickly. I don't really remember being in the air or anything at all. All I knew was that I just, got slammed back down into this creek bed, and then just after hearing the crack of the rock breaking loose, and then hearing a second crack, as I found out afterwards, my pelvis was fractured, and having this incredible weight just grind down into my legs.
And this is in the middle of the night. You got up to go for a pee.
No, it was kind of getting on dark. It was dusk, I suppose. Yeah, okay. We had just finished cooking dinner, and we're really kind of getting ready for bed, to get into our sleeping bags underneath the tarpaulin, and to start continuing on upwards the next day. But obviously, and all of a sudden though, Giet hears me scream out and comes running across to this scene of me pinned underneath, from the waist down underneath this huge piece of rock. And yeah, you could say things got pretty crazy at that point, of just this frantic trying to get me out from under this thing. And neither of us have any idea really how long that went on for to this day. We don't know. It was 20 minutes, a couple of hours. We just really don't know until we got to the point where we realized that, this thing's not going to move. And the only way that I'm coming out is for him to hike out and organize a rescue. And that kind of, with that in mind, I mean, that first night was pretty much the longest night of my life, just waiting for the sun to come up, still in just incredible pain. And then watching Giet hike back down the mountain and just thinking, okay, well, this is kind of the deal. This is probably everything that I've gone through in life so far. I'm going to have to draw on to get through this next. I figured I was there for at least another day, at least another 24 hours.
For him to get out and get help.
Yeah, exactly. To get back down off the mountain to the beach where we'd met, and then to hike back along the beach to the place where the boat had dropped us off, because we're on an island and it's fairly remote. The boat only comes across once a day. And
oh wow.
So yeah, I kind of knew I was staring down the barrel, and it's like, okay, dude, you've just got to hang in there, and that's kind of what I settled in to do.
Wow, that is amazing. So what goes through your head at that point? I mean, keeping you focused and on just, I mean, I assume just staying conscious has got to be an effort.
It shifts and changes. In the beginning, it was in the beginning I actually tried to sleep as much as I could. I just thought, you know what, I really, if I could fast forward now to a rescue, then the best way I know to do that is just to sleep. If I could sleep through this whole thing, that'd be perfect. And I really did just try and sleep, which wasn't as easy as it. Obviously, with a ton of rock in your lap, it's not really that easy. But I think I drifted off every now and then, and then got to the point where probably 24 hours or so in, I realized, you know what, you can't sleep anymore. If you go to sleep now, you might not wake up. And so then things kind of flipped around. And then I started to hallucinate. And at that point, there was a point there where I definitely thought I was done. It was like, you know what, no matter how much staying psyched and trying to just kind of will myself to hang in there was definitely a point where it's like, dude, you're done. And I think what really was behind that was I lost track of time, and I was pretty convinced that I was into day 3 at one point, and that something must have happened to get, and that that nobody was coming, and then I really kind of started on this roller coaster ride of just hitting rock bottom, and they're going to find you dead here in a couple of days, and then kind of psyching myself to bounce back out again and try and hang in there. And yeah, it was kind of brutal. And just when I was kind of in the throes of that, finally, after pretty much the best part of 2 days, I got to hear the sound of that helicopter. And I still to this day, I hear a helicopter out the window. We're not far from the Alpine helicopters here in Canmore, and it just sends a kind of chill down my spine sometimes, when I hear that sound. Because up until I heard that sound, I thought I was not for this world any longer.
Wow. And then so how did they manage to get that boulder off you?
It took them 2.5 hours. And one of the things that I know that Geert really struggled with, I think all heard the term survivor guilt, and he really went through that. If I could have just done something better, why couldn't we lift that rock? And it's like, dude, it took them 2.5 hours to lift that with a hydraulic jack, 4 guys, crowbars, wooden blocks. And so we were absolutely not going to move that rock on our own, especially with me underneath it.
Right. Wow. So they got you out. They got you to the hospital, and sort of what happens next?
Yeah, they got me. They kind of landed in the parking lot across the street from the hospital and wheeled me across, and had a team of doctors and nurses start to run all kinds of tests on me. And eventually, a surgeon came in, Dr. Bill Clark, and he said, Warren, you realize your legs have been badly damaged. And I said, yeah, I get that. I could see my right knee and my right foot the way I was trapped, and it didn't look great, and I thought there's a chance that you could lose that foot. And in all honesty, I just pushed that thought out of my mind. It's like, don't even go there. All right, you got enough to worry about. But then he says, well, I hate to be the one to have to tell you this, but we're gonna have to amputate your legs. And that kind of ripped something out of me, just straight out of my guts, because I'd let myself think, for a few seconds about losing one foot and then pushed it out, but I had in no way entertained the idea of losing both. And I just said, holy shit, what are we talking here? How high are we talking? And he says, above your knees. At that point, I'm like, I'm out.
Wow.
Out. And cried myself to sleep and woke up the following morning into a whole new world. It's kind of 10 days in intensive care, and pretty much in those early days, I think for the whole of that time in intensive care, I really didn't let myself think about the fact that I'd lost my legs. I really felt like I was in a full-on fight to survive, and it was only really when I kind of got out of that danger zone that I started to think about, okay, so what does this mean? What kind of life can somebody possibly have with no legs, especially somebody that's been active in the outdoors? And
I was going to say, an outdoorsman and a climber, that's got to hit you pretty hard. Yeah,
it's kind of like having everything taken away, but at the same time, I had this incredible feeling that hey, I'm still here. It's almost like giving a second chance. They're still alive. So it was a very mixed kind of time of emotions, for sure. And I think what happened as well, I tell you, the really interesting thing that happened is pretty soon after the accident, they kind of moved me out into the general ward. And these tiny little, because what happens when something like this happens to you, you all of a sudden, everywhere you turn is an obstacle, right? There's something trying to shut you down. And so I would find these, and then what would happen is I'd start to figure out how to do something. And, that was as simple as kind of lifting up to a bar above my bed and lifting myself up so they could get the sheets out from under me and stuff. And it's like, hey, that was cool, getting that figured out, and then figuring out how to use a wheelchair. And over time, the way I would describe it is I kind of started to tap into the power of putting something behind you.
Okay.
And how it makes us stronger for the next thing, the next challenge that comes up. And at one point, it was almost like somebody flipped on a light bulb, and it was like, holy smokes, if there's that much power in this, and I'm getting such a kick out of putting some of these things behind me. I actually started looking for challenges at that point, and that's kind of when things started to get really interesting.
Right. Well, so I suppose you've now lost both your legs above the knee, so I guess you're done climbing at that point.
I'm pretty much done doing everything for the first month or so, I suppose. What life really became about reclaiming my life back, like trying to get as many normal things back as I could. And so things like driving, somebody told me that I'd be able to drive with a hand control fitted to a car. So it's like, okay, well, let's get that sorted out and let's do that. So there's another piece of life back to normal. And then, just before the call, you talked about fitness and staying in shape. And, I was in pretty good shape, and it's like, okay, so I'm going to have to be in even better shape now to get around in a wheelchair like this. So I kind of became obsessed,
right,
with working out and doing laps around the hospital in my chair, and it's kind of just giving myself the best shot possible to get on top of this situation. Because I was in rehab with a lot of people that you could see they were just beaten down by it. They'd given up.
Right.
Found themselves in a similar situation, and that was it. It was kind of like life was over, and I'm a little bit more stubborn than that.
So speak to that then. What's the difference between somebody that's had a catastrophic event like that happen, that sits there and says, I'm done and gives up, versus, you obviously made a decision to turn that another direction. I mean, what do you think the difference is between those two mindsets, and how do you sort of harness that mindset?
Yeah, well, I think you hit right on it with one word, and that's choice. We have a choice in how we respond or how we act pretty much in any given moment or any given day, or hundreds or thousands of moments in any given day. And I think sometimes people just don't realize that. They think that a choice has been made for them. And I saw a lot of people get stuck in this mindset of, well, why did this have to happen to me? It's not fair and all the rest. And it's like, well, dude, it's done. You can't get stuck there. How long are you going to sit there spinning those wheels for?
Right.
And they just couldn't break out of that. So for me, I kind of use it's almost like a reverse motivational technique, I suppose, that I use. Is my question, the way that I break out of it, because I'm not going to sit here and say that I never got depressed through all of this and I just cruised on happily ever after. I definitely found myself depressed, but the question always became, how long are you going to stay here for?
Right.
How long are you going to stay down this? I kind of likened it to being down a deep, dark black hole. And it was like, okay, you happy down here? And, you kind of ask that question enough times and it's like, absolutely not. And that would kind of give me the kick in the ass back out. And, why we all can't do that, I'm not sure. Sometimes I think it's the gravity of the situation. Even something so extreme as, for a couple of guys losing 1 foot wasn't enough to kind of bounce them back out of that hole. Maybe they needed something, they needed to be pushed up against the wall even harder. I'm not too sure. Or for some people, maybe there's a give up point. I'm not sure, I don't know. But for me, it was definitely, it's about, okay, you've got a second chance here. Are you gonna kick back feeling sorry for yourself, or are you going to see what you can make out of this? And that was the question that got me going was, okay, what's possible here? What kind of life can somebody have without legs? Let's go find out.
Right. So a lot of it is about the questions you ask yourself too.
I think so. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, how long, when you sort of get in those dark places, because as you said, I mean, let's not blow smoke here and pretend that everything was rosy all the way through. But did you sort of give yourself a time limit for that? I can feel down today, but tomorrow I need to get up and change my attitude, or?
Yeah, not so much a time limit. What I would do, and then this still works really well to me to this day, is one of the tricks that I use is I just make myself go and do something.
Right.
Even if I don't want to, it's I have tons of times where it's like, oh God, I really just don't feel like whatever it is, going for a ski, going for a ride, whatever. And I think that if you can make yourself get out the door, then you're really halfway there, because I'm a huge believer in just the power of exercise and moving our bodies, and that's how it gets the endorphins going, and it's kind of like flicking a switch, I think. And it especially is for me, even if I often I don't even see it on the outset, I still kind of fight going out to do that workout or whatever, even though I know that the benefits, I still have to fight it myself. I think in a lot of ways we all do. Well, most people I know anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting because it brings up that question: what comes first? Does the motivation come first or the activity? So if I'm going to wait till I'm motivated to do the activity, sometimes that just doesn't happen. But if, as you say, you force yourself to go do the activity.
Exactly.
You find it does tend to kick up that motivation level.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of it's like things aren't static anymore. It's like you've created some kind of forward movement, and not just physically. I mean, that's kind of a key thing that I kind of like to point out to people, even creatively. I mean, most of the best ideas I've ever had, I don't know if any of them happen sitting in front of a computer. I'll go out for a ride or a ski or just wheeling around, and I used to carry a voice recorder. Now I just do it on my phone. But I'm kind of the wheels get turning. You kind of you're moving, the energy's moving, and just most of the best ideas I've ever had have happened in that while I'm out doing something, and all of a sudden I've got to pull over and get it down, record it. I lost way too many great ideas to a bad memory before I started doing that.
So everybody that's listening now I know what's going through their head. How does a guy with no legs ski?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. So I use I was going to say a mono ski. I ski mainly cross country these days. So I've got kind of an aluminum frame with a carbon fiber bucket that I kind of squeeze into. It's kind of like a miniature wheelchair frame, I suppose, with carbon fiber seat, and then two skis on the bottom. Okay. And then a couple poles, and it's double poling all the way. So I use that to ski. For cycling, I got a hand cycle, so two wheels at the back, one at the front, and then you kind of got the cranks there at eye height, and just pedal with your arms. But I mean, there's lots of cool toys out there these days that can get us out. Somebody like me that can get you out doing most of the things that you want to do, for sure.
Right. So let's go back. I was kind of setting you up and teasing you a little bit earlier when I said I guess that means you stopped climbing after you lost your legs, because I know that's not true. So maybe tell us about because when you talk about getting back out there, you didn't just get back out there in a small way.
Yeah, true. It's I kind of hinted at earlier that once you put something behind you, how it you're kind of tapping into this power that sets you up stronger for the next thing that comes along. And then how I took that ball and ran with it. So in the beginning, it was about getting my life back, and so then I started quote unquote hiking in the wheelchair, and next thing you know, I'm camping and collecting firewood, and by throwing it underneath my chair, and I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of getting a fair bit of this figured out. And then I would go on longer and longer hikes, and then eventually one day I just had this light bulb go off in my head with a picture of a mountain in Tasmania off the southeast coast of Australia, and a question of, well, I wonder if a guy with no legs could climb a mountain, and it kind of sat in there for a little bit. And I'd already climbed Cradle Mountain twice before, and I thought, you know what, there's really only one way to find out. And so I started training and got a team together and headed down to Tasmania, and over the course of a couple of days climbed to the top of Cradle Mountain. And that was really one of the times that kind of blew the lid off what this meant, what life could look like now for a guy with no legs. And as the kind of natural progression goes, no sooner that we got down from Cradle Mountain. Oh, have I still got you there? Because I just noticed I got
you bet.
I got somebody trying to Skype me there. I'm just going to hang up for a second. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, it was, one thing after another. Next thing I had another mountain in Tasmania that somebody put the idea into my head, and it's like, well, that's kind of a huge deal. I'm not sure that I'm up for that. But again, I kind of sat with it for a while and started thinking about, okay, these are the pieces that I know are possible. There's a whole bunch of pieces that I'm not too sure about, but if I can figure most of it out and then pull the trigger and start moving, kind of use that forward momentum, then I think we can figure the rest of it out. And that turned out to be the case. So kind of got that peak done. And then eventually the idea of climbing Kilimanjaro jumped into my head, and that one kind of really freaked me out. It's like when the idea was first in there, it's my reaction was, get out. I don't want that idea in my head.
Right.
And, Kilimanjaro is almost 6,000 meters. It's 19,222 feet or whatever. But again, eventually it's like, you know what? I got a lot of these pieces figured out. Let's just pull the trigger and go for it. And so it's kind of been this journey, I suppose, of adapting, and then looking at some of these challenges that pop up and asking the question, okay, is this something that's going to shut me down or not? And and then just figuring out what those parameters look like.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, you go.
No, I was just going to get you to give some context as far as Kilimanjaro, because that's not an easy climb for anybody, is it?
Not really. I mean, it always depends on who you talk to. I got a buddy here in Canmore that was just up on Kilimanjaro last year, climbing the last of the ice up there, and Will is it's probably the best ice climber in the world, I suppose. And so for him to just run up Kilimanjaro to climb ice up there is pretty straightforward. But no, it's not super easy. I mean, it's high, 19,500 feet. Got a bit of altitude that's going to kick in there, that's going to try and shut you down. And a lot of people don't make it to the top. So yeah, it's definitely not easy. I figured out, I kind of broke it down into pieces, if you like, and it all really became a case of putting, one prosthetic foot in front of the other and just slowly but surely making my way up towards the summit. I mean, it took 18 days all in all. Now, but here's the interesting thing. So at the time, nobody in my position had ever done that or done anything like that. Now, within 3 or 4 years, I've kind of lost count to the number of guys that are, double above knee amputees that have climbed Kilimanjaro. I think I started stopped counting at about 6 or 8. But I'm sure there's a bunch more. There's even a young guy called Kyle Maynard, was born without arms and legs, climbed Kili last year, which was off the charts. And I mean,
Wow.
he did it in about 7 days. So it's that classic thing that we talked about, that we talk about with Roger Bannister and the 4-minute mile. As soon as it had been done, opens up the floodgates.
Yeah. Well, and again, that comes back to, I think, some of your message on perception.
Yeah, exactly.
Of what you think is possible.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's a good point. I talk a lot about perception these days, and really questioning how we see things, how we see events, how we see situations, and that Kilimanjaro thing is a classic. 1 minute it can be seen as this, holy smokes, I don't think so. I don't think that's possible. And once it's been done, it's okay. Well, I want to do it. What tools do I need? Which route am I going to take? And it just it opens up those gates for sure. So that's been really cool. And I suppose the coolest part of that is most of those guys have come to me first and said, okay, what kind of feet do I need? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? What kind of, what about gear and staying warm? So being a resource like that is probably one of the coolest things that's come out of that whole Kilimanjaro climb, I'd say.
Oh, very neat. Well, it's funny because I remember your message from the Alberta Mortgage Brokers Association conference, and correct me if I'm a little bit off on this, but what I took away from that was when you change the way you see the world, you change the world. Am I correct in?
Yeah, that's pretty much bang on. Yeah, when you change the way you see the world, you change the world. It's that whole idea. And often people hear that and they think, well, it kind of sounds a bit out there. It's or as I like to joke, not in Vancouver. In Vancouver, they're all over it, but everywhere east of Vancouver, they're like, well, it sounds a little bit woo woo. But no, I'm a huge believer in it. It's not so much that the world changes, but the way we interact or what we see in terms of possibilities or obstacles changes, and it's the actions that we take that lead to everything changing. So it's I mean, if you come up bang up against a situation and you're convinced that that's it, that it's game over or insurmountable or whatever, well, that's probably what you're going to get. Whereas what I encourage people to do is just to kind of step back and ask that question. What am I missing here? How am I seeing this? Is there something that I'm not, that I'm just not taking into account? And yeah, I mean, I still use that to this day.
Well, I was going to say, so I was going to ask you exactly that. Is there sort of a formula for, I mean, you don't need to lose both your legs and climb Mount Kilimanjaro to be able to sort of shift your perception or how you see things. So
yeah, unfortunately I did, apparently, but
yes.
But no, I think we can all learn how to do it. It's just, unfortunately, it's one of those things that we don't put a lot of effort into learning. I mean, it's kind of similar in a way to resilience. I talk a lot about resilience these days, and people would say to me, wow, you must have learned a lot about resilience being under that rock. And it's like, well, no, actually what got me through that experience was the resilience that I'd built up prior to finding myself under that rock. Otherwise, I'm not too sure that I would have made it through. And so I'm a big proponent of actually practicing resilience, doing something that challenges us. And, for us, it might be, staying in shape is one of those things, because you're constantly kind of pushing at the edges and, into that uncomfortable state, which of course is where the growth is. And I'm a huge believer that when we do that it transfers out, that when we get into the habit of challenging ourselves in one way, that it gives us something to draw upon when tougher things come up in other areas of our lives. I think if we always kind of lived in this super comfortable zone, it would be way easier to take out.
So what does resilience mean to you? Maybe define that for us a little bit.
Yeah, I think resilience to me means being able to handle more, or being able to handle what life throws at us. And so for me, it's really about comfort zone. And so these days when I speak, I kind of have this model that I put up, and it's got the kind of the man in the middle with a circle around him, and then how a lot of the work that I had done to expand that circle. So I kind of expanded my comfort zone, so to speak, so I could kind of handle more, was what held me in good stead and kind of got me through that accident. People would say to me, I don't know how you survived. I don't know how you got through that accident. And it's like, well, you got to remember, I had spent a lot of time in the outdoors, and so that whole piece about being exposed to the weather and being out, with the sun beating down on me, rain, all the rest of it, that was kind of off the table in terms of that being a big deal. So yeah, I think that's what resilience is. It's kind of how much we can handle, what shuts us down, what doesn't.
So, and when you talk about practicing resilience, so you're talking about finding circumstances, situations that you can put yourself into that do sort of test your mettle a little bit, or take you outside of your comfort zone. Would that be?
Yeah, and I think there's lots of different ways you can do that. One is staying in shape, whether that's weight training or running or whatever it is. That's one way. Another way for me is playing guitar. I've kind of dabbled with the guitar over the years, and what I find is when I commit to picking it up and just getting that little bit better, that that helps. That kind of builds some kind of resilience somewhere, because I'm kind of showing myself that, hey, you're not just gonna stay stuck where you are with this thing. Like, right, we've got to just try and get a little bit better every day on with this instrument. So I think that helps. I think committing to some kind of learning that challenges us helps. And anything basically where we're not just on a cruise control.
Right. And what are you doing for any suggestions from a learning perspective? Obviously, you're out teaching, speaking, inspiring. Are there things that you could recommend for people that are looking to sort of expand their mind and learn?
Yeah, I mean, different things. I mean, for me, I've had coaches on and off over the years. I find that really, really helps. Being accountable to somebody, for sure.
Yes.
That's something that's really helped me grow. And one of the coaches that I've worked with is a speaker that I really admire in the US, Joe Calloway. And he's a guy that's just reinvented himself so many times it's not funny. So being able to bounce ideas and have him come back at me and saying, well, hang on a minute, well, why don't you do, why don't you do this? Why don't you kind of push more down that road? So that's kind of helped hugely. I think other things for sure that have taken me kind of way outside of my comfort zone is something like Landmark Forum. I did the Landmark Forum years ago. I'm not too sure if you're familiar with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's kind of a tough deal to go through. Incredibly beneficial. I think I think everybody should do that forum. So just those, any of that kind of work, that kind of personal development work, I think it all really, really helps. There was somebody else in the speaking industry, I can't remember what it was now, but they made a comment that I read years ago that said, the more that I work on my own personal development, the more my business increases or improves. And I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in who before what. Focusing on who you are before what you do. Yeah, I think the what you do comes as a result of who you are.
Exactly.
So one of the things we talked about a little bit back and forth in the email is doing what you can with what you've got, and you mentioned that you've been doing a little bit of rehab on a shoulder.
Yeah, that's been an interesting process for me for sure, because then you start to bang up against some limitations again, right? So
Hmm.
one minute you think, okay, well, yeah, I've been through this deal, I've been through this accident, I got the world by the tail, I'm doing all this crazy climbing, and then next thing you kind of start to bang up against some hard edges. So yeah, that's kind of been interesting. I started having problems in one of my shoulders probably 18 months ago or so, and bouncing on the trampoline back in Australia with one of my nieces actually was kind of crazy. I was showing off on the trampoline, and next thing I was like, hey, that didn't feel great, and over the course of the next few months, could barely use one shoulder, and then it kind of morphed into both. And so yeah, I've really had to adapt what I do. I had to figure out a different way to ski, and for a long time couldn't really ski, couldn't really do much at all. So that was really like a tough mental exercise for me, because if one of your outlets is physical exercise, not being able to do it was definitely a tough go. And part of it was just one of the kind of courses that I've got up online. It's just like an online kind of training courses. I talk a lot in it about acceptance, and so that was a huge uh, exercise in acceptance for me. It's just
Right.
like, dude, this is the deal. You're gonna sit tight with this for a while, and then we're just kind of gonna rehab back slowly to the point that you can start to do things again. And that's kind of where I'm at now. But still with limits. And when you asked about skiing earlier, I've got a brand new downhill mono ski that I've yet to make a single turn in yet.
Right.
So that's kind of been frustrating, just having that sit there. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, you can either focus on that, or you can look at the fact that in terms of cross country skiing, I probably skied, I don't know, 30 or 40 days this year, and so I figured, you know what, I'll take that. I'm happy with that. And so yeah, just definitely been a real exercise in just taking what you can get out of a situation, rather than just being completely bummed and overwhelmed by the downside of it. It's been interesting.
Right. So, sorry, you mentioned an online course. Do you have an online course that people can
Yeah,
look at?
yeah, they can. And probably the easiest way, well, there's a couple of ways that you can get to it. I've got a kind of like a not so much a secret page, but a VIP page on my website. So it's warren-mcdonald.com/VIP. And that's usually a site that I give out to audiences when I'm speaking, in because I've got some cool posters that you can download there. But what I've done is I've also thrown in like an introductory, I think it's 4 weeks, to this course that I rolled out a couple of years ago now. It's mainly kind of video based, and just different lessons that get fired off to you, each week. And yeah, it's something I think I'm ready to kind of look at the next evolution of that. As I said, it's a couple of years old. I've got some new ideas that I want to build into it. So I think when we revamp that course at some point, we'll kind of update it a little bit. But yeah, definitely some interesting stuff on acceptance in there. And then of course the next step after that, once we've been through acceptance, is responsibility. It's like, I get it. This is where I'm at, and if I'm going to move forward and out of this, who's going to do that? Who's going to kind of make the decisions, pull the trigger, take the step, all that stuff. It's me. It's up to me, and then that's kind of where the responsibility piece kicks in.
Right.
And then probably my favorite part to the third piece is creating crisis. I'm kind of a huge believer that we create these mini crises for ourselves. And what we're really talking about there is just challenging ourselves, doing something that challenges us and, moves us into those uncharted waters where I think, we usually kind of make it's where we discover, the next product, the next next step that we want to take, the next thing or whatever is in those times where we're not just cruising along on cruise control, but we've somehow shaken things up or had things shaken up for us.
Right. Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes is if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you.
Yeah.
And I do a fair bit of yoga, and the instructors always talk about finding your edge. You know, when you're in a pose, they talk about finding your edge. So I think that's a lot of what you're talking about. So we're bumping up on our time here. Is there anything you want to, any sort of final words you want our audience to walk away with?
No, you know what? I think we kind of covered. We covered perception. We covered resilience. I'll tell you. Here's another thing that's probably good to close on that I think that's really helped me is there was a point where I made this decision to look at life through the eyes of an explorer, and that is, I think, something that we can all learn from. You know, rather than kind of being all freaked out or defeated or beaten down by the things that happen to us, is to try and somehow be psyched about the idea of, do you know what? You know, I get to navigate this now. You know, who gets to deal with this, or I'm gonna try and get jazzed by the idea of working through this and coming out the other side. And that's something that's definitely held me in good stead over the years.
Oh, fantastic. That is great stuff. Well, Warren, I know you've got to run it, and I certainly appreciate your time. Is there any? Have you got any speaking events, public speaking events coming up in Alberta recently, or are you away for most of your?
Yeah, most of what I got on the horizon, is either down in the States or, and a lot of the stuff that I do tends to be, you know, closed kind of corporate events. But
right.
But hey, I'm going to ping you if we do something public more, locally. And
well, certainly a lot of our audience here is in the business of putting on conferences, and so I will make sure that when I get the show notes up, that there's links to your website and how to find you, because like I said, your presentation, you know, I've seen dozens of speakers and presentations over the years, and yours was certainly one that has stuck with me. And I was actually just chatting with one of the agents in our office before we got on the phone here, and she was at that presentation as well, and remembered it quite fondly. So
nice.
All right, sir. Well, I appreciate your time, and I'll let you get back to it.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Mike. Great to chat, and hope to catch you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Warren.
Cheers, Mike.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you get a chance, give us a rating on iTunes or send me feedback at mike@axiomortgage.ca. You can also subscribe for updates at mikecameron.ca, and we'll keep you in the loop as to what we've got coming up. No junk mail, no sales pitch, no garbage, I promise.